The council chamber on Nexus Prime was massive. 47 different species had representatives sitting in the curved rows of seats that stretched up toward the domed ceiling. Translator devices hummed softly as they converted hundreds of languages into something everyone could understand. The air smelled strange, a mix of different atmospheres and biological scents that made the ventilation system work overtime. Ambassador Jack Harper sat in the human section, halfway up the chamber on the left side. He had been Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 8 years now. His aide, Katie Morris, sat beside him with her datapad, taking notes as always. On his other side was Ben Wright, the military liaison who coordinated with Council security forces. Jack watched as the Vrexian delegate stood to speak. The Vrexians were tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. This one, named Kexlan, was particularly loud and enjoyed the sound of his own voice. "The human proposal is ridiculous," Kexlan announced, his translator making his words sound sharp and dismissive. "They want us to create a joint defense force to patrol the outer territories. They claim pirates are becoming a serious threat, but we all know what this really is. The humans want to play soldier. They want to pretend they are warriors defending the galaxy." Several delegates laughed. The Tellurian ambassador, a floating creature surrounded by a glowing energy field, chimed in with agreement. "Humans have been part of this council for only 30 years. 30 years. Some of our species have been here for centuries, yet they constantly push for change, for action, for doing things differently. Perhaps they should spend more time learning and less time teaching." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Jack felt Katie tense beside him, but he remained still. His face showed nothing. The vote was called. The human proposal for the Joint Defense Initiative was rejected by a margin of 41 to 6. Only the younger species, the ones who had joined the council recently, had voted in favor. The established powers, the ones who controlled the committees and made the real decisions, had voted no. Jack stood up. The movement was smooth and calm. He picked up his datapad from the desk in front of him. Katie and Ben looked at him, confused at first. Then understanding dawned on their faces. They stood as well, gathering their things. The Delcarian delegate, who had been speaking about the next agenda item, paused. "Ambassador Harper, the session is not yet concluded." Jack said nothing. He simply walked toward the exit, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. Katie and Ben followed him. The 3 humans left the chamber without a word, without a gesture, without even a backward glance. Behind them, the delegates resumed their meeting. A few made jokes about human pride. Most simply moved on to the next topic. It was not the first time someone had walked out of a council session in frustration. They always came back. Everyone always came back. But this time was different. In the human embassy building, just a kilometer from the council headquarters, Jack called a meeting. Every human working on Nexus Prime gathered in the main conference room. There were 37 of them, ranging from diplomats to maintenance workers. "We're leaving," Jack said simply. "All of us. Begin packing immediately. We depart in 48 hours. A young embassy clerk named Chris spoke up. "Sir, do we have authorization from Earth for this?" Jack smiled slightly. "I spoke with the Secretary of External Affairs this morning. Earth supports this decision completely. They've been waiting for us to make the call." Katie pulled up a star chart on the main display. "This isn't just us. Every human in council space is being recalled. Scientists, engineers, medical staff, military advisors, everyone. The withdrawal is coordinated and simultaneous." "What about our projects?" asked Elena, one of the human engineers who maintained the station's power systems. "I'm in the middle of upgrading the primary reactor. If I leave now, it could fail in a few months." "Then it fails," Jack said quietly. "We've spent 30 years fixing their problems, improving their systems, and saving their lives. They've spent 30 years ignoring us, dismissing us, and treating us like children. We're done." Ben brought up another display, showing human positions throughout council space. Red dots began appearing as confirmation messages came in. "The medical team on Telluria is packing. The agricultural researchers on Planera are closing their lab. The military advisors with the Council fleet are submitting their resignations. Everyone is moving. Over the next 2 days, the human embassy became a hub of quiet, efficient activity. Files were encrypted and stored. Equipment was packed or destroyed if it contained sensitive technology. The humans worked with the same calm professionalism they had always shown, but there was something different now. They seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The Council barely noticed at first. A few delegates commented that they hadn't seen Ambassador Harper at the reception on the second evening. The Vrexian security chief mentioned that human patrol ships had left their assigned sectors, but no one thought much of it. On the morning of the third day, the human transport ships departed from Nexus Prime. The entire human delegation, all 37 people, boarded 3 sleek vessels and left the station. They filed no flight plan beyond returning to Earth. They issued no statement. They answered no questions. The pattern repeated across Council space. Human research stations powered down and emptied. Human embassy buildings locked their doors. Human military officers packed their gear and boarded transports home. In some places, local officials tried to stop them, asking for explanations or demanding they fulfill their contracts. The humans simply showed their diplomatic credentials, which gave them the right to leave any Council world without restriction, and departed. On the quantum relay station in the Outer Rim, Chief Engineer Paul Martinez supervised the shutdown of the human quarters. His Delcarian colleague, Nex Vul, approached him with concern written across his face. "Paul, you cannot leave. You are the only one who understands the quantum entanglement matrix. I have been trying to learn, but it is so complex." Paul handed him a data chip. "Here's all the documentation. It's written in simple terms. If you follow the procedures exactly, the system should be stable for about 6 months. And after 6 months? After 6 months, you'll need to figure it out yourself. Or hire human contractors, though that will be expensive." Paul picked up his last bag. "I recommended upgrades to this system 3 years ago. The Council said it was too costly and unnecessary. Now you'll find out if I was right." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Human doctors explained to their alien colleagues that yes, the treatment protocols were all documented, but understanding why they worked required years of study. Human engineers noted that their automated systems needed constant adjustment and would eventually fail without human oversight. Human tactical advisors mentioned that they had written detailed reports on enemy capabilities, but those reports had been filed away unread. The aliens who worked closely with humans began to feel a creeping sense of unease. They had grown accustomed to having humans around, fixing problems, offering solutions, quietly making things work. Now the humans were going away, and suddenly the systems and projects that had seemed so stable looked fragile and uncertain. Back on Earth, Jack Harper stood in the office of the Secretary of External Affairs, Dan Cooper. Through the window, they could see the lights of Geneva spreading out below them. "Do you think they'll come asking us to return?" Dan asked. Jack shook his head. "Not for a while. First, they have to realize we're gone. Then they have to realize what that means. Then they have to admit they need us. That's going to take time, probably more time than they have. And if they do come, then we'll see if they've learned anything." Jack turned from the window. 30 years, Dan. 30 years we tried to help them. They didn't want help. They wanted servants who knew their place. Well, now they can see what the galaxy looks like without us." Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. The Galactic Council continued its session on Nexus Prime, unaware that everything was about to change. The humans had left without saying a word, and sometimes, silence speaks louder than any speech ever could. 3 weeks after the humans left, the quantum communication network failed for the first time in 17 years. The failure lasted only 6 minutes, but those 6 minutes caused chaos across 12 sectors. Financial transactions froze. Emergency communications went dark. Military coordination collapsed. The Delcarian chief engineer, Nex Vul, stared at the error codes scrolling across his screen. He had never seen this particular combination before. The documentation Paul Martinez had left him mentioned this type of failure. But the solution required recalibrating the quantum entanglement nodes. Paul had always handled that personally. Nexvul tried to follow the written instructions. The process was delicate. One wrong adjustment could destabilize the entire network. His hands shook as he worked. After 4 hours, he managed to restore basic functionality, but the system was running at only 70% efficiency. "This is temporary," he told his supervisor. "The nodes need complete recalibration. Paul used to do this maintenance every month. I never realized he was doing it because we never had problems." His supervisor, a Vrexian administrator, waved away his concerns. "You fixed it. The network is running. That's all that matters." "But it will fail again," Nexvul insisted. "Probably within 2 weeks. And next time might be worse." The administrator ignored him and filed a report stating that the issue was resolved. Nexvul went back to his station and tried to teach himself advanced quantum mechanics from the human documentation. The concepts made his head hurt. On Planara, the agricultural world that fed 6 systems, Colony Director Velzara walked through fields of dying crops. The tall grain that should have been golden was turning brown and brittle. Soil samples showed increasing acidity levels. The entire harvest was at risk. "When did this start?" she asked her chief agronomist. "About 2 weeks ago," the agronomist replied. "But looking at the data, the soil has been degrading for years. Someone was treating it, keeping the pH levels stable." "Who?" The agronomist pulled up old records. "The human research team. Dr. Lisa Grant and her people. They were running a long-term soil health study. Looks like they were also quietly adding mineral supplements to the irrigation system. They never mentioned it in their reports." Velzara felt cold despite the warm sun. "Why wouldn't they tell us?" "They did." The agronomist showed her a file. 3 years ago, Dr. Grant submitted a proposal to implement a permanent soil treatment program. She warned that without it, we'd face crop failures within 5 years. The Council's Agricultural Committee rejected the proposal as unnecessary. So she did it anyway? She did it anyway, and now she's gone, and we have 6 billion people depending on these crops. Velzara contacted the Galactic Council's Agricultural Division. They promised to send experts. The experts arrived 2 weeks later, studied the problem, and confirmed what Dr. Grant had already told them 3 years ago. By then, 20% of the crops were lost. In military headquarters on Nexus Prime, Commander Vrextal reviewed casualty reports from the Outer Rim. 3 Council patrol ships had been destroyed by pirates. The pirates had used a simple ambush tactic, something that should never have worked against trained military crews. "Explain this," Vrextal demanded of his tactical staff. The staff officers looked uncomfortable. Finally, one spoke up. "Sir, the tactical coordination software crashed during the engagement. The ships couldn't share targeting data or coordinate their movements. They fought as individuals rather than as a unit." "Why did the software crash?" "It's outdated, sir. The last major update was 6 months ago. The system requires constant patches and modifications to handle new ship configurations and weapon systems." Vrextal's jaw tightened. "Who was responsible for those updates?" "The human programming team, sir. Lieutenant Ryan Clark and his staff. They submitted update packages every month. We approved them automatically because they always worked." "Where is Lieutenant Clark now?" "Earth, sir. He and his entire team left with the human withdrawal." Vrextal accessed the military database and discovered something that made his blood run cold. Over the past 30 years, human advisors had been present at every major council military operation, not as commanders, usually just as consultants or observers. But when he read the after-action reports carefully, he saw their fingerprints everywhere. A suggestion for a flanking maneuver here. A recommendation for a sensor sweep there. Small things, quiet things, that turned potential defeats into victories. The humans had been making the council military look good, and now they were gone. Council leader Varmoth called an emergency session. The chamber was only half full. Several delegates were dealing with crises on their home worlds. The mood was tense. "We need to address the human situation," Varmoth began. "It appears their departure has created certain complications." "Complications?" Ambassador Silvara of Taloria spoke up, her energy field flickering with agitation. "Our medical research station has made no progress in 6 months. The plague affecting my people is spreading. Dr. Lisa Grant was leading the research, and without her, the project is stalled. The quantum network is unstable," added the Delcarian representative. "We've had 3 failures in the past week. Our engineers cannot maintain systems they don't understand. Pirates have destroyed 7 ships in the Outer Rim," Vrextal reported. "Our tactical response is inadequate without human coordination software." The complaints continued. Trade systems failing. Research projects abandoned. Infrastructure breaking down. Every delegate had a story about something that wasn't working anymore. Kexlan, the Vrexian who had mocked the human defense proposal, stood up. "This is temporary. Yes, the humans performed certain functions. But we can learn those functions. We can hire new experts. We can adapt. With respect," Nexville spoke up from the observation gallery. "It's not that simple. The humans didn't just perform functions. They understood entire systems. They saw connections we missed. They fixed problems we didn't know we had. Then we'll learn," Kexlan insisted. "We are not children. We don't need humans to hold our hands." "No," said Velzara quietly. "We just needed them to keep our civilizations running." The chamber fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. The Galactic Council had been coasting on human competence for 30 years. The humans had fixed problems, improved systems, and prevented disasters, all while being dismissed and ignored. Now they were gone. And the galaxy was discovering just how much it had depended on them. Varmoth cleared his throat. "Clearly, we need to initiate contact with Earth. Open negotiations for their return." "On what terms?" Silvara asked. "We'll offer full restoration of their privileges, seats on key committees, recognition of their contributions. Will it be enough?" Varmoth didn't answer. He wasn't sure. The humans had left without demands, without negotiations, without even a statement of grievances. They had simply walked away. That wasn't the behavior of someone playing political games. That was the behavior of someone who had given up entirely. Still, the council had to try. A diplomatic envoy was assembled. Kexlan volunteered to lead it, confident that the humans would return once they saw sense. Varmoth reluctantly approved. The envoy would depart within a week. Meanwhile, across council space, the small problems were becoming larger. The quantum network failed completely for 2 hours, cutting off communication between entire star systems. On Planara, food riots broke out as crop yields fell below critical levels. Pirate attacks increased in frequency and boldness. And on the borders of council space, the Xyloran Empire watched with interest. Their intelligence reports confirmed what the council was slowly learning. The humans had been the glue holding everything together. Without them, the council was weak, disorganized, and vulnerable. The Xyloran military began drawing up invasion plans. Back on Earth, Katie Morris compiled reports from human observers who were monitoring council space from a distance. The picture was clear. The council was falling apart faster than anyone had predicted. "Should we say something?" she asked Jack. "Warn them?" Jack shook his head. "We spent 30 years warning them. They didn't listen. Maybe they'll learn more from experience than they ever learned from our advice. People are suffering. The Plenaran food shortage could turn into a famine. Then maybe the council will approve the soil treatment program that Lisa Grant proposed 3 years ago." Jack's voice was hard. "We're not responsible for their choices, Katie. We tried to help. They didn't want our help. Now they get to live with the consequences." Katie looked at the reports again. The quantum network, the crop failures, the military defeats. Each one was a problem that humans had been quietly solving. Each one was something the council had taken for granted. "They're going to come asking us to return," she said. "Yes. What will we say?" Jack thought for a moment. "We'll see if they've learned anything. If they still think we're the problem, instead of understanding that they were the problem, then we have nothing to talk about. In space above Earth, a new human colony ship prepared for departure. It was heading to a world outside Council space, to join the growing network of independent human settlements. The humans weren't sitting around waiting for the Council to fail. They were building something new, something better. The Galactic Council was discovering what it meant to lose the people who had been keeping everything working. And that discovery was only just beginning. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The Galactic Council's headquarters on Nexus Prime looked the same from the outside, but inside, everything was falling apart. Council analyst Devron sat in the archives room, surrounded by decades of records. He was young for his species, barely into his 2nd century, and he had been given a task that no one else wanted. His supervisor had told him to figure out exactly what the humans had been doing during their 30 years in the Council. The answer was disturbing. Devron pulled up file after file. Every one told the same story. Human engineers identifying structural weaknesses in stations before they became critical. Human doctors developing treatments for diseases that Council medical staff had declared incurable. Human economists predicting market crashes and quietly implementing safeguards. Human programmers fixing bugs in essential software that no one else even knew existed. The pattern was everywhere. Humans would identify a problem, submit a formal report, watch that report get dismissed or ignored, and then fix the problem anyway without asking for permission or credit. They had been holding the entire Council infrastructure together through sheer competence and stubbornness. Devron found one file that made him feel sick. It was a report from 5 years ago written by a human named Greg Phillips. Greg had been analyzing the Council's defense network and found a critical vulnerability. Enemy ships could potentially hack into the command system using a specific frequency. Greg had recommended an immediate fix. The report was marked as paranoid speculation and filed away. Greg had fixed it anyway. He had rewritten the entire security protocol in his spare time and installed it without authorization. 3 years later, the Xyloran Empire had attempted exactly the attack Greg had warned about. The attack had failed because of Greg's unauthorized fix. The Council had never known how close they had come to total military collapse. There were 847 files like this. 847 times, humans had identified problems, been ignored, and solved the problems anyway. Devron wrote his report and submitted it to Council leader Varmoth. He waited for a response. None came. 3 days later, he discovered his report had been classified as confidential and locked away. Someone didn't want this information becoming public. On Caldonia Prime, the plague that had been contained for years was spreading again. Dr. Nina Harper, who ran the colony's main hospital, read through Lisa Grant's research notes with growing despair. The human doctor had been close to a cure. Her work was brilliant, making connections that no one else had seen. But her notes ended abruptly when she left 6 months ago. Nina tried to continue the research, but she couldn't understand Lisa's methodology. The concepts were too advanced, too unusual. Lisa had been thinking about the plague in ways that Council medical science didn't support, and her approach had been working. "We need to contact her," Nina told the Caledonian health minister. "Bring her back. Pay her whatever she wants." "The Council has forbidden individual members from making separate agreements with humans," the minister replied. "All contact must go through official channels." "Then use official channels. People are dying." The Council sent a delegation to Earth 3 months ago. The humans refused to negotiate. Nina wanted to scream. Instead, she went back to her lab and tried again to decipher Lisa's notes. Outside, the plague spread to 3 more cities. The death count climbed. In the Outer Rim, pirate attacks had become so common that trade ships refused to travel without military escort. But the Council fleet couldn't provide enough escorts. They were spread too thin, responding to crisis after crisis, losing ships faster than they could be replaced. Commander Vrextal studied tactical reports and felt himself aging. Every battle was a struggle. His officers couldn't adapt to changing situations. They followed their training perfectly. But when the enemy did something unexpected, they froze. The humans had never frozen. They had always known what to do. Sir, his aide said quietly. The Xyloran Empire has moved battle groups to the border. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for an invasion. Vrextal had known this was coming. The Xylorans had been watching the council fall apart. Now they saw opportunity. How many ships can we muster? 200. If we pull forces from every sector, the Xylorans will bring at least 300. Vrextal closed his eyes. We're going to lose. Should we request human assistance? The humans aren't part of the council anymore. They have no obligation to help us. But they might. If we ask. Vrextal considered it. The humans had always been willing to help before, even when the council treated them poorly. But he remembered the way Ambassador Jack Harper had walked out of the chamber 6 months ago. That had been the walk of someone who was finished, done. Not angry, not hurt, just completely finished with the entire situation. No, Vrextal said finally. We made our choice. Now we live with it. The trade network collapsed completely when the automated customs system crashed. The system had been designed by human programmers 20 years ago. It was elegant and efficient, handling millions of transactions per day across dozens of different trade protocols and tax systems. Council programmers tried to fix it. They spent 3 weeks analyzing the code. It was beautiful work, compact and efficient, but they couldn't understand how it worked. Every component connected to every other component in ways that seemed impossible. When they tried to modify one section, 3 other sections stopped working. Finally, someone found comments in the code. Little notes the human programmers had left for themselves. Fix the Vrexian tax calculation bug here. Don't touch this, or the whole thing crashes. And workaround for Tellurian data format issues. Yes, this looks wrong, but it's the only way that works. The code wasn't just a program. It was 30 years of accumulated fixes and workarounds and patches, all layered on top of each other. Only the humans who had built it understood how all the pieces fit together, and they were gone. Trade stopped. Ships sat in stations, unable to clear customs. Goods rotted in warehouses. Economies began to collapse. Kexlan, who had led the diplomatic envoy to Earth, sat in his office and reviewed the disaster. The meeting with Dan Cooper had been humiliating. The human hadn't shouted or made demands. He had simply shown them the truth. 30 years of rejected proposals, dismissed warnings, and ignored advice. And then he had told them no, the humans weren't coming back. They weren't playing games or trying to negotiate better terms. They were genuinely done with the Galactic Council. Kexlan had been so sure the humans needed the Council that their presence in galactic politics was dependent on Council membership. He had been completely wrong. Intelligence reports showed that humanity was thriving. They had established 20 new colonies in the past 6 months. They had formed alliances with species beyond Council space. Their economy was growing faster than anyone had predicted. The humans didn't need the Council. The Council needed the humans. Ambassador Silvara called an emergency meeting of the senior delegates. Only 12 showed up. The others were dealing with crises on their homeworlds. The chamber felt empty and cold. We must acknowledge reality, Silvara said. The Council is failing. Our infrastructure is collapsing. Our military is weak. Our economy is in chaos. And the Xylorans are preparing to invade. We need the humans, and we need them now. They already refused to return, someone pointed out. Then we offer more. Full voting rights, control of key committees, whatever they want. And if they still refuse? No one answered. The possibility was too terrible to consider. The Galactic Council, which had existed for centuries and prided itself on bringing civilization to the galaxy, might actually fall. Not from external conquest, but from internal collapse caused by their own arrogance and stupidity. Devron, sitting in the observation gallery, raised his hand. He wasn't supposed to speak, but he did anyway. The humans don't want more power in the Council. They don't want seats on committees. They don't want anything from us. Then what do they want? Varmoth demanded. Nothing, Devron said simply. That's what we don't understand. They don't want anything from us because they don't need us. We're the ones who need them. And we refused to see it until it was too late. The chamber was silent. The truth was painful but undeniable. Varmoth stood slowly. Prepare a second delegation. I'll lead it myself. We'll offer unconditional terms. Full apology. Complete recognition of past contributions. And we'll ask, with all humility, for them to return. And if they say no again? Silvara asked quietly. Then we face the consequences of our choices. On Earth. Jack Harper received notification that the Council was sending another delegation. This time, Varmoth himself would lead it. That was significant. The Council leader never left Nexus Prime for diplomatic missions. His presence meant they were truly desperate. What will you tell them? Katie asked. Jack looked out at the night sky. Up there, somewhere, the Galactic Council was falling apart. Species that had joined together for mutual benefit were discovering that their union had been held together by the very people they had dismissed and ignored. I'll tell them the truth, Jack said. That we tried for 30 years. That we gave them our best efforts, our brightest minds, and our honest advice, and that they threw it all away because they couldn't stand the idea that humans might know something they didn't. Will we help them? That depends on whether they've learned anything. If they still think this is about political power or trade agreements, then no. But if they've finally understood that this was about respect, about valuing competence over pride, about listening to good advice regardless of who gives it, then maybe we can talk. Katie nodded. She had been with Jack through all 30 years. She had seen the dismissals, the mockery, the casual contempt. She had also seen the humans keep working, keep helping, keep trying to make things better, even when no one appreciated it. They're paying a high price for their arrogance, she said. Yes, Jack agreed. And they're going to pay an even higher price before this is over. The Xylarans are moving. When they attack, the Council is going to lose. Badly. And then they'll understand just how much they needed us. The second delegation would arrive in a week. Until then, Earth waited. The humans weren't celebrating the Council's collapse. They weren't happy about the suffering it was causing. But they also weren't going to rush in and fix problems that the Council had created through decades of poor decisions. Sometimes, the only way to learn was through consequences. And the Galactic Council was about to get a hard lesson in what happens when you take competent people for granted. The conference room in Geneva was simple and plain. No grand diplomatic hall. No impressive displays of power. Just a rectangular table, 12 chairs, and windows overlooking the city. Council leader Varmoth found the simplicity unsettling. He was used to ceremonies and formal protocols. This felt more like a business meeting than a diplomatic summit. Dan Cooper, Earth's Secretary of External Affairs, entered the room with 2 aides. He wore a simple suit. No ceremonial robes or decorations. He shook hands with each member of the Council delegation, a human gesture that felt oddly intimate after the formal bows and ritual greetings common in Council space. Thank you for meeting with us, Varmoth began. He had prepared a long speech, full of diplomatic language and careful phrases, but looking at Dan's calm, patient expression, he decided to skip it. We made a mistake. We dismissed your contributions. We ignored your advice. We treated you poorly, and now our civilization is paying the price. We're here to ask you to return. On what terms? Dan asked. Any terms you want. Full voting rights. Seats on all major committees. Control of infrastructure projects. A formal apology from the Council. Recognition of all past contributions. We'll put it in writing. Make it legally binding. Whatever you need. Dan nodded slowly. That's very generous. He pulled a datapad from his bag and slid it across the table. Before we discuss terms, I'd like you to read something. Varmoth picked up the pad. The file was titled, Human Proposals Submitted to the Galactic Council, 2000, 155 to 2000, 185. He began reading. The first entry was from 30 years ago, shortly after humanity joined the Council. It was a proposal for upgrading the quantum communication network to handle increased traffic and prevent cascade failures. Status: rejected. Reason: unnecessary expense. Current system adequate. The second proposal warned about structural weaknesses in orbital stations built using Vrexian construction standards. It recommended additional bracing in high-stress areas. Status: rejected. Reason: Vrexian engineering has proven reliable for centuries. Human concerns are unfounded. The third proposal suggested a joint medical research initiative to study diseases that affected multiple species. It included specific recommendations for plague containment on Caledonia Prime. Status: rejected. Reason: Council medical science is sufficient. Human participation not required. Varmoth kept reading. Proposal after proposal, warning after warning, recommendation after recommendation. Every single one rejected or ignored. Every single one had been right. The quantum network had failed. Exactly as predicted. Orbital stations had suffered structural failures. The Caledonian plague had spread. The trade system had collapsed. The military had suffered defeats. Pirates had become a major threat. Everything the humans had warned about had happened. 3 hours later, Varmoth finished reading. His 3 fellow delegates had been reading over his shoulder. The room was completely silent. "You tried to tell us," Varmoth said quietly. "About everything." "We tried," Dan agreed. "For 30 years. You didn't want to listen." Ambassador Silvara spoke up, her energy field dim with shame. "I voted against your infrastructure proposals. I thought you were exaggerating the risks. I thought you wanted to waste council resources on problems that didn't exist." "The problems existed," Dan said. "We fixed most of them anyway, without authorization or budget. Because people's lives depended on those systems working." "Why?" Kexlan asked. The Vrexian delegate who had mocked humans so confidently 6 months ago now looked broken. "Why did you help us after we rejected your proposals? Why not just let the systems fail and prove you were right?" Dan's expression was hard. "Because that's not who we are. We don't let people die to prove a point. We saw problems. We had the ability to fix them. So we fixed them. We didn't do it for recognition or credit. We did it because it was the right thing to do. And we took it all for granted," Varmoth said. "Yes. We treated you like servants. Like children who didn't know their place. Yes. And now you're leaving us to face the consequences." Dan leaned forward. "We're not leaving you to anything. We already left. 6 months ago. You're the ones who have to decide what happens next. You can learn from this, change how you operate, start valuing competence over pride. Or you can keep making the same mistakes and hope someone else will clean up after you. But that someone isn't going to be us." Varmoth felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine shame. "We need you. The council is collapsing. The Xylorans are preparing to invade. Our infrastructure is failing. Without your help, thousands of species are going to suffer. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you spent 30 years dismissing our help." The words were harsh but fair. Varmoth had no response. Silvera tried a different approach. "What about the innocent people? The citizens who had nothing to do with council politics? The Caledonian children dying from the plague? The colonists on Planara facing starvation? They didn't dismiss you. They didn't vote against your proposals. Why should they suffer for our mistakes?" Dan's expression softened slightly. "You're right. They don't deserve to suffer. And we're not going to let them." He pulled up another file on his datapad. 3 days ago, we sold the cure for the Caledonian plague to your medical authorities. At cost, no profit. We've also shipped grain to Planara to prevent immediate starvation. And we've shared the quantum network maintenance protocols with your engineers. "Why?" Varmoth asked, confused. "If you're refusing to return, why help at all?" "Because those are humanitarian issues. We're not going to let people die to make a political point. But sharing emergency aid is very different from rejoining the council. We'll help prevent immediate disasters, We're not going to come back and hold your civilization together. Katie Morris, sitting beside Dan, spoke for the first time. The council didn't fail because humans left. The council was already failing. We were just covering up the cracks, fixing the problems, hiding the symptoms. When we left, you finally saw what your organization had become. Arrogant, inefficient, and dependent on people you didn't respect. The truth was devastating. The council hadn't been functioning well. It had been functioning terribly. And only human efforts had kept it from complete collapse. Devron, the young analyst who had compiled the report on human contributions, was sitting in the back of the room. He had been included in the delegation as an expert on the situation. He raised his hand hesitantly. "Yes," Dan said. "I read through all your reports, all 847 of them. I calculated that humans prevented approximately 12,000 deaths, stopped 16 infrastructure collapses, and prevented at least 4 wars through early diplomatic intervention, all while being paid a fraction of what other species received for similar work, all while being mocked and dismissed in council sessions." Devron's voice shook. "My generation grew up believing the council was great because of its wisdom and cooperation. Now I know it was great because humans were quietly fixing everything we broke." "Not just humans," Dan corrected. "There were others too. Good people from many species who did the right thing, even when it wasn't appreciated. But yes, humans did a lot. And we got tired of not being heard." Varmoth made one last attempt. "If you won't rejoin the council, will you at least help us defend against the Xylorans? Our military is weak. They're going to invade within weeks. Thousands will die." Dan was quiet for a long moment. "No, but you just said you'd help with humanitarian issues. Helping you fight your wars isn't a humanitarian issue. It's enabling your bad decisions. You rejected our defense proposals for 30 years. You cut military spending while expanding into hostile territory. You ignored intelligence reports about Xyloran buildup. You created this situation. You need to face it." "People will die," Silvara said desperately. "Yes, and maybe that will finally teach the council the lesson it needs to learn. That actions have consequences. That ignoring good advice leads to disaster. That competence matters more than pride." The meeting ended shortly after. The council delegation returned to their ship in silence. They had come offering everything they thought humans wanted: power, recognition, and respect. And they had been refused. Not with anger or demands, but with a simple statement of fact: the humans were done. On the flight back to Nexus Prime, Varmoth read through intelligence reports. They were grim. The Xylorans had assembled 300 warships on the border. The council could muster maybe 200, and those would be poorly coordinated. The invasion would be a massacre. "What do we do?" Silvara asked. "We fight," Varmoth said, "and we lose. And we learn. If we survive, the humans could stop this. They have the military strength. They have the tactical knowledge. The humans gave us 30 years to prepare for this. We ignored them. Now we pay the price." Meanwhile, intelligence was coming in about human activities beyond council space. They had established diplomatic relations with the Calorian Union, a powerful alliance that had stayed neutral in council affairs. They had opened 3 new trade routes that bypassed council space entirely. Their colony worlds were thriving. Most disturbing of all, there were reports of a brief military engagement between human forces and Xyloran scouts. The Xylorans had attempted to test human defenses. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. The Xylorans lost 6 ships. The humans lost none. After the battle, the Xyloran Empire had contacted Earth with a proposal for a non-aggression pact. The humans had accepted. The Xylorans, who were about to invade council space, had looked at humanity and decided they didn't want that fight. Kexlan stared at the reports in disbelief. "They're not just surviving without us. They're thriving. They're stronger than we ever knew." "They were always strong," Devron said quietly. "We just never respected them enough to notice." The delegation arrived back at Nexus Prime to find the council in chaos. The quantum network had failed completely. Trade was at a standstill. and Xyloran ships were crossing the border. The invasion had begun. The Council's worst fears were coming true, and the humans who might have saved them were building a new future far away. 2 years had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council, 2 years that had changed everything. Council leader Varmoth stood at the window of his office on Nexus Prime, looking out at the station's docking bays. They were half empty. Once, ships from dozens of species had crowded those bays, trading goods and sharing knowledge. Now, only a handful of vessels remained, and most of those were military ships on patrol. The Galactic Council had survived the Xyloran invasion, barely. 3 worlds had been conquered before the Council managed to negotiate a ceasefire, not a victory. Not even a draw. Just a ceasefire that left the Xylorans in control of valuable territory, and the Council weakened and humiliated. The military losses had been staggering. 83 ships destroyed. Thousands of crew members killed. And for what? The Council forces had fought bravely but poorly, making tactical mistakes that any competent advisor could have prevented. Mistakes that human advisors had prevented for 30 years. Varmoth's desk held a report from military intelligence. It described the one battle where Xyloran forces had tried to push into human space. The engagement had been brief and one-sided. Human ships had appeared, destroyed the Xyloran attack force in minutes, and disappeared. No pursuit, no territorial claims, just a simple message: stay out of human space. The Xylorans had listened. They had signed a non-aggression pact with humanity and turned their full attention to Council territory. The humans had done exactly what they said they would do. They focused on their own interests and let the Council face its own consequences. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Devron entered, carrying another stack of reports. The young analyst had been promoted 3 times in 2 years. Good people were rare in the Council now, and Devron was very good. The latest census data, Devron said, placing the reports on Varmoth's desk. 12 more species have formally withdrawn from the Council. That brings us to 32 member species, down from 47. Which species? Mostly smaller ones. They're applying for membership in the Human Alliance instead. The Human Alliance. It hurt to even think about it. 2 years ago, it hadn't existed. Now it was a thriving coalition of 23 species, growing rapidly, and already more influential than the Galactic Council. The humans had built in 2 years what the Council had taken centuries to create. And they had done it better. What's the status of the infrastructure repairs? Varmoth asked. Slow. We've managed to stabilize the quantum network at about 60% functionality. The trade system is running, but it crashes frequently. We've hired independent contractors for most maintenance work. Devron paused. They charge 10 times what we used to pay human engineers. And they're not as good. Can we afford it? Barely. The war cost us most of our reserves. We're operating on a minimal budget. Varmoth rubbed his eyes. He was tired. So tired. Every day brought new problems. New crises. New evidence of how badly the Council had failed. What about Planera? The famine was contained, but barely. Human grain shipments prevented mass starvation. They're still selling us food at fair prices. But they've made it clear, this is temporary humanitarian aid, not a permanent solution. We need to fix our own agricultural systems. And the Caledonian plague? Contained. The human cure worked perfectly. It saved millions of lives. Devron's voice was bitter. Dr. Lisa Grant deserves a medal. Instead, we have a note in the file saying her research proposal was rejected as too speculative. There was a long silence. Finally, Varmoth spoke. I watched the news broadcasts from Human Alliance Space. Have you seen them? Yes, sir. They're happy. Prosperous. Growing. They've established 40 new colonies in 2 years. Their economy is booming. Their scientific output has tripled. They've made first contact with 6 new species and brought 4 of them into the Alliance. I know. And we're here, struggling to keep basic systems running, losing members every month, trying to rebuild from a war we could have prevented. Varmoth turned from the window. We had them. We had the best and brightest humanity had to offer. And we threw them away because we were too proud to listen. Devron said nothing. What was there to say? The truth was obvious to everyone now. A communication alert blinked on Varmoth's console. He accepted it and saw Ambassador Jack Harper's face appear on the screen. The human looked older than Varmoth remembered, but he also looked content. Happy, even. Ambassador Harper, Varmoth said. This is unexpected. I'm not ambassador anymore, Jack replied. I'm the Secretary General of the Human Alliance now. Different job entirely. I'm calling because I'm going to be interviewed by the Galactic News Network in an hour, and I wanted to give you advance warning about what I'm going to say. That's considerate of you. Professional courtesy. Jack's expression was unreadable. They're going to ask me if humans would ever consider rejoining the Galactic Council. I'm going to tell them no, firmly and finally. I wanted you to hear it from me first, rather than watching it on the news. Varmoth felt something break inside him. He had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so clearly was still painful. May I ask why? Because the Council hasn't changed. You're still operating the same way, making the same mistakes, just with fewer resources and more desperation. You've patched the immediate problems, but you haven't fixed the underlying issues. We've implemented reforms that you're already ignoring. Last week, a Vrexian engineer proposed a new design for the quantum network. Good design, solid engineering. Your technical committee rejected it because it didn't follow traditional methods. That's exactly what you did to us for 30 years. Varmoth wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The report was sitting on his desk. The engineer had been right. The committee had been wrong. And the council had chosen tradition over competence. Again. We're trying, Varmoth said quietly. I know. And I genuinely hope you succeed. But humanity has moved on. We're building something new, something better. We're working with species who value competence over credentials, results over tradition, and cooperation over hierarchy. We're not going back to an organization that treated us the way the Council did. Some of our member species are leaving to join your alliance. Yes. We welcome them. We have a simple admission process. Prove you can contribute something useful. Agree to follow common sense rules. And treat other members with respect. It works well. It sounds like you're building everything the Council was supposed to be. Jack smiled slightly. We're building what the Council could have been if it had listened to good advice instead of dismissing it. If it had valued competence instead of political connections. If it had focused on solving problems instead of maintaining power structures. The interview broadcast an hour later. Varmoth watched it in his office, alone. Jack was professional and diplomatic, but his message was clear. Humans had tried to work within the Council system. They had been rejected and dismissed, so they had left and built something better. And they weren't coming back. The interviewer asked the question everyone wanted answered. Do you regret humanity's 30 years in the Galactic Council? Jack thought for a moment before answering. No. We learned a lot. We made friends with some genuinely good people. We helped save lives and prevent disasters. That work mattered, and I'm proud of what we accomplished. But the institution itself was broken. Arrogant. Resistant to change. We couldn't fix it from inside. Sometimes, you have to walk away and start fresh. Some say humanity abandoned the Council out of spite. Some people are wrong. Jack's voice was calm but firm. We didn't leave out of spite. We left because we had better things to do. And we were right. Look at what we've built in 2 years. Look at the species who are choosing to join us, instead of staying with the Council. The results speak for themselves. What would you say to Council Leader Varmoth if you could speak to him directly? I'd say that I respect him. He's trying to fix an unfixable situation. And that takes courage. But I'd also tell him that some institutions fail because they deserve to fail. The Galactic Council had centuries to learn humility, to value competence, to treat its members with respect. It didn't. Now it's facing the consequences. The interview ended. Varmuth turned off the screen and sat in the dark. Jack was right about everything. The council did deserve to fail. It had wasted centuries of opportunity, dismissed brilliant people, and chosen pride over wisdom at every turn. His console chimed with another message. This one was from the Delcarian representative. Another species was withdrawing from the council. That made 31 members. The organization was dying slowly, losing credibility and membership with each passing month. Varmuth thought about the day, 2 years ago, when Jack Harper had stood up in the council chamber and walked out without a word. At the time, Varmuth had barely noticed. He had been too busy feeling pleased that the troublesome humans were finally leaving. Now he understood what that moment had really meant. It wasn't the beginning of humanity's decline. It was the beginning of the council's end. The humans hadn't needed the council. The council had needed the humans. And by the time the council realized that truth, it was far too late. In space above Earth, a new human colony ship departed for the outer territories. It carried 5,000 colonists and enough supplies to establish a thriving settlement on a virgin world. Similar ships were launching from a dozen human worlds, carrying humanity's dream of expansion and growth to the stars. The human alliance was growing. New species were applying for membership every month. Trade was flourishing. Research was advancing. The alliance was everything the Galactic Council had claimed to be but never was. A genuine partnership of equals, working together for mutual benefit. Katie Morris stood in mission control, watching the colony ship's departure. Jack Harper joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Do you ever think about going back?" Katie asked. "Helping them rebuild?" "No," Jack said simply. "We gave them 30 years. We gave them everything we had. They didn't want it. I'm not going to waste time mourning what could have been. I'm going to focus on building what will be. Some of them were good people. Yes. And those good people are welcome to join us. Devron has already applied for Alliance membership. So have several other junior officials who are tired of watching the council fail. We judge people by their actions, not their affiliations. Anyone who wants to contribute is welcome." Katie smiled. "We really did it. We walked away from the biggest diplomatic organization in the galaxy and built something better. We did. Not out of anger or revenge. We did it because we could, and because it was the right thing to do." Far away on Nexus Prime, Varmuth closed his files and prepared to face another day of crisis management. The Galactic Council would survive for a while longer. But its glory days were over. It had squandered its greatest asset, human competence and cooperation, and now it would spend decades trying to rebuild what it had carelessly thrown away. The humans had left without saying a word. And that silence, Varmuth now understood, had spoken louder than any declaration or ultimatum ever could. It had said, "We're done, and we're moving on." And the council was left behind, facing the consequences of its arrogance, finally understanding what it had lost. But understanding came too late. The humans weren't looking back. They were building the future, and the Galactic Council was not part of it.